PlayStation 5 is gonna do something cool.
Eliminate load times forever.
Hot take.
PlayStation.
All right, so we just got a new interview about the producer on Fairy Tail talking about the PlayStation 5 and talking about how the SSD hard drive that's going to be in it is going to change a lot of things about game development, specifically removing load times entirely. Now, this is assuming the game is developed solely with an SSD in mind.
Yes.
And he's saying, well, the challenge now for developers is how will this affect pacing? Because developers take pacing into account whether they put in like I know in God of War, they would create these tunnels to slow the player down to load so that you never actually realize there was load screens. And for an RPG, this is pretty important when you're building a story and you need to create this tension and then you need to create a slope. So what do you think this is going to mean in the next generation? The fact that we're not going to see load times anymore. Do you think it's really what it's going to be, or do you think we're going to see marketing hype?
Yeah. So there's been a lot of this conversation going on. Like we've known about the idea that Sony really wants to get rid of loading times for a while with the PlayStation 5, but this is one of the first times we've actually heard a developer specifically talk about this in an interview where it essentially wasn't basically said that, do you have this information? No, it's just, well, you know what? We're going to have to make games a little bit differently moving forward. So, in the past, for those of you that do not remember, in the days of cartridges and old things like that, we really didn't have loading times. That's because every bit of information that was needed to be accessed was on a cartridge that was really fast to read, and we didn't have to store that information anywhere.
We didn't have open world either, though.
Yeah,
very different game types back on the cartridge days. Now it's a whole different ball game.
Absolutely. But this is something that essentially kind of goes to show what is going to be modifying as we move forward. So, in my opinion, I do believe that there is a possibility that we might see no loading times moving forward into the PlayStation 5 at least, where I cannot guarantee that with other systems. However, we do have like a specific kind of cartridge design being used with Nintendo Switch, but that hasn't removed loading times from happening.
No. It hasn't. I don't think we're going to see this. Maybe at the end of the PlayStation 5's life cycle, we're going to see really optimized games. But I can't imagine that switch happening right at launch where we're going to see such a drastic difference.
Yes.
Now, they're already saying the SSD is going to be 19 times faster than what we're used to today. So I think we're going to see load times go like, and it's done.
Yeah.
But at launch, at least in the first year, I can't imagine things being that drastic right now, especially as developers are probably going to be making games for other platforms, specifically like PS4, PS5 at the same time.
Yes.
It would probably be harder to develop kind of two entirely separate games based around different hardware like that on the SSD.
I couldn't agree more, right? When you're getting into this, the new generation of systems, there's going to be a lot of people just going, you know what? I could release Watch Dogs on 2 different systems at the same time. Ubisoft! There's no way you're going to be making a specific PlayStation 5 version that does not have all the problems of the PlayStation 4 version coming over. So let's not act like this isn't going to happen.
You're giving me flashbacks of Assassin's Creed Unity.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, God, that was rough.
Huge variations and differences, but the game still pulled over from that. I do believe that the developer, though, of Fairy Tail is talking about something, the producer. He is saying stuff that isn't totally inaccurate. So, for instance, cutscenes were brought up.
Yeah, he mentioned cinematics will be better, and that really surprised me because when we think of an SSD, we think load times, and I never thought this would impact cinematics, but you mentioned that, oh yeah, this kind of makes sense now that we think about it.
Okay, how about this, folks? I'm about to blow your mind. Think about this. Whenever you see a cutscene in a video game, does the cutscene take place in multiple sections of an open world, or does it usually take place in one specific section? What I mean by this is essentially when you see a game world in any kind of open world game, you're loading chunks of that world at parts. You're not seeing the whole thing all at once. And when a cutscene happens, traditionally that cutscene takes place in one set area. But if there's ever been an instance where you've seen the camera jump to another location somewhere else in the world, what likely happened was they loaded an instance of the world where you can just see that one chunk where you just were, and then they put a box somewhere really close by that character that is loading that other section. This is a very common tactic that has been used in 3D games for years and years and years. In fact, this is something I'm aware of them doing in Nintendo 64 as well. Like, it goes that far back.
Now, to clarify, we are talking about not pre-rendered cutscenes, which is basically just playing a video file, but you're talking about an environment that's been built.
A real-time cutscene.
Real-time cutscene. So the developers have their environment built and they drop a camera in there and they basically control the scene as they want. But because of hardware limitations and memory limitations, they can't do that right now. So they have to strip away a bunch of the environment just to focus on that one set that they want to showcase
Yes.
in the cutscene.
Now, why would you want to be doing this? Why would you be so excited about real-time cutscenes having the ability to basically use any kind of instance that's happening in an open world? Well, this opens up a ton of options. One, developers don't have to think about the limitations of making cutscenes or loading screens or anything like that, because all they have to do is just say, oh, you need to get over there? Okay, just click this button and you're there. Or we need to do a cutscene. Well, the cutscene will load a lot faster because they don't have to load the other instances in that one piece of the world. But what makes this so much more important, I know a lot of people out there are like, why don't we just have all cutscenes done through video files? Well, there's a reason why. Entering into the next generation, we're not just talking about 4K, we're talking about 8K. And if you're to make video files that are conformed to a certain resolution, well, you might not be making 8K videos right now, but if you have a real-time, in-engine generated cutscene, you can easily tell that cutscene to go to 8K resolution by just changing the resolution of the engine. It's really fast, and if it's done right, it can be pretty effective.
But on the other side, if they are building these games for 8K, you're talking about much deeper files for textures.
Yes.
Wouldn't that kind of counterbalance any gains made in memory or SSD? So, we're talking about all these gains that they're making, but at the same time, if they're also trying to push to 8K, that's going to be more taxing as well.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
so
I don't think
might just balance out and nothing happens.
Yeah, I don't think we're getting to 8K right away. I don't even think we're going to be seeing a lot of 4K games happening. I mean, like, folks, if you've got an Xbox One X or a PlayStation 4 Pro, you know how difficult 4K is, and it doesn't mean that the games are running at 4K all the time. But with that being said, there are some issues here that I think all gamers should care about. Now, maybe the cutscene things isn't really a big important thing to you because you're a gamer and you don't look at the back end. You just know that the cutscene is actually showing you things. That's all we care about.
It's the time to take a drink.
Yes.
Usually you put your control down, you can drink,
Right.
you can watch the cutscene.
But when it comes to the loading sequences in games, that matters. Now, there are a couple things to keep in mind here. Loading scenes are still going to happen in games when you're going online, because you have to basically be on an online instance or a bunch of other people are coming in at randomly different times. It's a thing. It doesn't mean you're going to see, like, Call of Duty isn't just going to load into online instances right away. That's not something that's going to happen with this generation. That largely has to do with internet delays as it stands right now. But when it comes to any kind of experience like going through a main menu, loading up a stage, looking at any kind of model, if the SSD that they're talking about using is theoretically that fast and it does help with that much data transfer, you could be loading a larger set of things much quicker, and they could predict those things. Like, for instance, if we're going to use an example like Spider-Man, which was used to show off the fast loading times previously, they basically showed going in one direction. Because it's an open world. In an open world game, if you're going in one direction or the other direction, they just need to know that they need to load that section of that next world. So they're basically capable of loading those sections a lot faster. That's the idea here. And when it comes to games that allow you to just go anywhere all at once, those loading screens might be so limited that originally the break that you would have in a game development or any kind of game experience where, let's say, a cutscene was playing, because we do have many games where a cutscene plays and that's actually the loading screen. If you try to skip it, it says just wait, it's now loading. That stuff happens all the time. But what this developer is saying is soon developers are not going to be able to use that to hide those loading screens. So, or need to use them.
Now, the fact that you brought up Spider-Man, interesting observation on how this would change gameplay. So you have all of New York or Manhattan.
Yeah.
And right now, when you're playing through Spider-Man, you're swinging through, you have to load new chunks of the city, and then you have to basically unload the chunks that you're far enough from. So if you did something in that chunk, it basically resets. If you go far enough and come back, it resets.
Right. Yeah.
But now with these new capabilities of potentially the PlayStation, if it's everything they say it is, you could potentially have all of Manhattan be alive, be loaded all at once. So if you're doing something in the south end, you go all the way to the north end, you come back in the south end. That pedestrian that you kicked in the shin and he's still like holding it. He's still there in pain.
Because you got faster read and write times, which allows that game to basically hold that stuff for a lot longer. It can make impressive games. The way I was explaining this before I got on camera was Hitman. Hitman is one instance of a world, like a little level or whatever, and no matter what you do in that instance, if you were to like drop a marble in one section of the level, you could go all the way to the other end and come back and that marble would still be there. But in Spider-Man, that doesn't happen because it's a gigantic city where a bunch of things need to be remembered. Now, I'm not saying that the game is going to remember absolutely everything that happens, like a little dent on the wall and stuff like that, but maybe there's a character that's really important to the story or something, and they can make they can make that character interact with the world a lot better.
Right.
So for instance, what if you're really far away from a character and he's running away from you, and as the character's running away, he's knocking over other NPCs in the world or a trash can and stuff like that, and you can follow what that character has done and follow that path of destruction. And the path of destruction wasn't designed by the game developers like by making a very specific instance. They just told the world, do this, and it happened.
Right.
That's what would make this so interesting.
Because right now you see that kind of gameplay in games, but it's always like, all right, this mission is starting.
Yes.
They give you a starting point, and then they go. And
Yep.
if you wait too long or you go out there like, mission failed, and you got to restart.
Oh, yeah, there's also, you've seen this happen. I know if you've played an open world, you have seen this happen a billion times. Oh, you're too far away from the person you're tracking.
Hate that.
Sometimes that is a game design choice, right? But other times it's because the farther you are away from that instance from happening, the harder it is for the game engine to load those sequences. So maybe game developers can start utilizing these new techniques from the PlayStation 5. But this also brings up a very important thing. Does this mean that PlayStation 5 games that are developed with that system in mind can't transfer over to the Xbox, can't transfer over to the Switch? Possibly can't transfer over to the PC.
Could be a unique experience.
Yeah.
Another thing that I want to mention on the cutscenes that I realize, if the developers, so right now the way that it's set up, because they need to know exactly which assets they want in their scenes and all that, you're talking about a lot of pre-production time to make sure that they know exactly what they want to do, so that when it comes time to do it, they're not wasting time. But if that whole set, if you will, that world is all designed and they don't really need to know as much in advance, you're talking about cutting pre-production time down significantly for cutscenes, which means game development time shrinks as well. So we might see shorter development cycles.
Yes. See, when the PlayStation 4 was originally introduced, Mark Cerny, the head engineer, the designer of the PlayStation and all that, he went up to developers, and he's a developer himself, and he went up to these developers and said, hey, what do you want in a console? And instead of getting a cell processor, an emotion engine, or some other crazy piece of technology, they literally made the PlayStation 4 just an easy game system to develop on. And so the PlayStation 5, they're trying to go for those things, trying to make things even easier for developers. Where PlayStation 5 is trying to go in that path, Nintendo is trying to do something portable, so it's a little bit more restricting. And with Microsoft, we're not quite certain what their next, like, we just know powerful, that's all it is. But Microsoft hasn't really told us exactly what they're looking for.
They seem to be pushing the play anywhere angle in a different sense of Nintendo. Nintendo's like, here, take our console and play anywhere, whereas Microsoft's like, access our games from anywhere and play anywhere. So we'll see what they end up doing in a year from now. We're close to the next gen.
Oh, we are so close. So folks, are you excited about the concept of never having to see another loading screen in a game? Or do you think this is all just marketing hype and well, we're going to still have to see a ton of load screens all the time? Let us know what you think in the comments below.